views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program you probably know already, where we talk to reporters and editors and videographers and filmmakers and really anybody who's putting stuff out in the borough of the Bronx. And we're also sometimes going to be talking to podcasters, and I say that with an underscore because that's what we're doing today. Obviously, the biggest story for all of us right now is the inauguration and the assumption of presidential duties by our new president, Joe Biden. And anytime that I look for advice or information or background on what it means, I call one particular person, and it turns out that person is my son, Evan. So I'm welcoming Evan Axelbank to the Bronx Buzz. Nice to have you with us.
Yeah, it's it's good to talk to you. Although
A little
we talk,
strange.
yeah, a little strange. We talk what 3 or 4 times a day. You know how you know that you're really my dad. You're right back there on the wall there.
Oh, there
With
I
the
am.
rest of our family. So there we
Yeah.
go.
Well, you could
Suzanne
say
and Sean.
that, but we don't want to exchange pleasantries too long because we really have business to do.
We could
But
though.
I am doing this program from your bedroom in the Bronx. So you got a little bit of the Bronx. Just for people who don't know, Evan is a reporter at Fox 13 in Tampa, Florida. And he also hosts the podcast Axelbank Reports on History and Today. And I can tell you, as his father, that when he was a boy, he was always interested in presidents and he read books about presidents and really memorized a lot of stuff. And happily, he's carried a lot of that into his professional work as well. And so let's get right to it. Let's talk subject matter. We have a pandemic. We have an economy that is not doing well. Unemployment is certainly rising to horrific heights. We have had an attack on the Capitol, which is an historic event. Has any other president ever taken office with maybe not this exact issue, but this level of crises?
Well, there are 2 that come to mind. One of them would be Abraham Lincoln. The other would be FDR. If we talk about Abraham Lincoln, he took office after 7 states had already seceded in 1861. He came into the capital, Washington, D.C., under the threat of assassination. And they actually had to put a disguise on him as they took him through the train system, through America's train system. He made some stops on his way from Illinois to Washington. And on the way, they basically had to do it, use a diversion and send 2 trains. And they put him basically in a secret train car, put a disguise on him, and brought him into the Capitol under the cover of darkness. There was an assassination threat in the city of Baltimore that they were trying to avoid. It's unclear as to how realistic it was, but it did seem to be a credible threat. So they did that. So, but certainly 7 states seceding would count as a major crisis in American history. So Abraham Lincoln would be one. And then FDR came into office during the Great Depression. And so he took a number of steps in his first 100 days to try to turn that around. So without a doubt, FDR would also be considered the second president to take office during such a significant crisis. And then you could look at Barack Obama in 2008 and 9 during the financial crisis. So those 3 certainly come to mind. But America always has something going on that a new president has to take a handle of.
Has there ever been as big a difference between a previous administration and a brand new administration from a political point of view? I mean, they Trump and Biden could not be more diametrically opposed. Has there ever been this big a shift? Listen, Obama, George W. Bush to Obama was pretty significant, but not with the same kind of rancor that exists today.
Well, without a doubt, one would certainly think of Barack Obama to Donald Trump. Donald Trump signed a number of executive orders to overturn many of the things that Barack Obama had done, both in terms of immigration, in terms of the environment, certainly in terms of the pro-choice and pro-life debate in this country. So that would certainly be one major about face that America had done over the years, has gone through over the years. One would think of Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan. That was a significant change. And one also thinks of Dwight Eisenhower and JFK. You know, you had a young president taking over for a relatively old president. It was seen as the old guard handing off to the new guard. Um, Politics was not quite as divergent back then. There were still conservative Democrats. There were still liberal Republicans back then. But that would be, another time where administrations changed in a way that was symbolic of America's new direction. I think that would be a way to say it.
Let's talk about a vice president becoming president. George Herbert Walker Bush was Reagan's vice president, became a vice president right away. In this case, it's kind of unusual. Joe Biden was the vice president, but he waited 4 years and now he's the president. Has any other, I guess, twofold question. Has any other vice president skipped a term and then became president? And then also, how have they fared? Is there a way to measure how vice presidents have done when they became president?
I don't know that you can measure. I don't know that it would be related as to whether it was just a vice president taking office for a president. I don't know that you could make a case that they all kind of turn out one way. I think it depends on who the vice president is. But to answer your first question, yes, Richard Nixon went from being vice president from 53 to 61, then skipped 8 years between Kennedy and Johnson, and then took office in 1969. So Richard Nixon would be one. But in terms of vice presidents and how they do after they take office, it really depends on the person. Teddy Roosevelt was a vice president who turned into a very effective and long-lasting president with a legacy that lasted a long time. You could certainly take a look at Lyndon Johnson having a legacy that lasted a long time, both in different ways in terms of civil rights and the Vietnam War. I think America is still grappling over those two issues and those two impacts. And then you can look at vice presidents like George Herbert Walker Bush, not necessarily a tremendously effectual president, but certainly one that is seen now by both parties as having set a model for how to put partisanship aside and acting in the best interests of the country. So those would be some examples. And I was thinking of how many vice presidents have failed to become president, even after they tried. Al Gore certainly tried and failed. You would look at, there were so many who wanted to become president and who never did. FDR had three or four of them who never became, or three of them who never became president until Harry Truman did. Aaron Burr, going back to the late 1700s and early 1800s, he never became president and wanted to. You're so close, but so far in some ways. And I'll add one more. Andrew Johnson turned into just about the worst president America had ever had after being Lincoln's vice president for only a couple of months.
Well, you did mention Richard Nixon, and we should mention that his presidency ended badly.
It didn't end the way he wanted it to end. That's for sure.
To say the least. Inaugural speeches are kind of a big thing, and they're iconic in many ways. They really lay the groundwork for a presidency. The initial feedback was that Biden did a good job. Many people were, certainly his supporters were looking for, a new look at America, pledge for unity. There have, of course, been great inaugural speeches. Where does this fall? Is it fair to even look at it in the scope of history? How do we think, and how will historians look at what Joe Biden did on Inauguration Day?
Well, we don't know yet. We don't know how the ball game is going to turn out. I'll put it this way. Can you remember anything Bill Clinton said during his inaugural address? Can you remember his two of them? Can you remember anything Barack Obama said during his two inaugural addresses? Probably not. Even presidents who are seen as effectual don't always have inaugural addresses with moments that stick out. I think when you look at let's say John F. Kennedy's speech. That is seen as a landmark speech. Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address is seen as a landmark speech. But if you look at the clippings from those times, even when history kind of spits on your shoes, it's not exactly clear to those writing it right away. Sometimes it does take time. And certainly Abraham Lincoln and JFK both had their critics. And these addresses, it sometimes take a while for something to stick, because the moment that we are looking at them to kind of encapsulate, it doesn't necessarily present itself right away. It takes time to see what really was prescient.
And you look at 4 years and you say, well, 4 years, okay, it's like a long time, but not that long a time. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
these things, 4 years is a long time to see how something.
And we also have to remember that American history doesn't work in 4 and 8 year increments. Things don't happen necessarily related to the presidential terms of office. So even something that Joe Biden does today might not even, the results of it may not even present itself for 20 years. So inaugural addresses, they change over time,
I guess we're hoping that his work on the pandemic doesn't take 20 years, though. I have to say, I think we're all hoping. It doesn't matter what political party. We certainly hope that we're going in that direction. During the inauguration, by the way, my guest is my own son, Evan Axelbank, who is a podcaster who podcasts Axelbank Reports on History Today. He's also a TV news reporter in Tampa, Florida. I called you, or we texted during the inauguration. And I think either you noted or I noted that he was doing the swearing in at 11:49 a.m. The Constitution of the United States says it should be 12 noon. So at that moment that he lifted his hand off the Bible, was he the president even 11 minutes early, or is there some other consideration?
So he was not the president when he lifted his hand off of the Bible. The Constitution, I believe it's the 20th Amendment, although I'd have to be checked on that. But the 20th Amendment, I think, says, I know it says, whichever number it is, it says that at noon is when at noon is when the transfer of power happens. And it doesn't happen a moment before or a moment after that. The president does have to take the oath of office before the moment. So as long as he takes the oath of office before, at noon, he is or she is the president or vice president of the United States. And that's just a matter of the Constitution. So, I mean, I'm using an extreme example, but if a war somewhere were to start, Donald Trump would have been the one responsible for the first 8 minutes of the American response to it.
Or 11 minutes if you
11 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Right.
The other thing, and we're just got about a minute and a half left. The other thing that I think is worth noting, I mean, Kamala Harris being the vice president, first South Asian, first African-American vice president. Is there any sort of a precedent other than Barack Obama being the first Black president, just a few years ago? Or is this really a seminal moment in American history?
The short answer is this is unprecedented. The longer answer is, unless we can go back and do genealogical testing on all 48 or 49 presidents and find out what's really in their backgrounds. And I'm not saying there is anything that we don't know, but you never know until you know. It would certainly seem to be that this is a historic and landmark moment in our nation's history to have a female vice president, as you said, African-American, South Asian, all these other things. It's a terrific moment and one that certainly people everywhere can look to.
It's pretty startling also to note, and of course, history will determine its own path, that this is the oldest president. Joe Biden is the oldest president in history. So far, the first couple of days, he seems to be doing well, and we'll find out over time. My guest has been my son, Evan Axelbank, a reporter at Fox 13 in Tampa, Florida. Also, please check out his podcast. You want to hear more. Now you know why I check him out when it's time to find out stuff. Axelbank Reports on History and Today.
Well, it's so good to be here. And I do have to say, after having spent 15 years now on professional TV, this is the first place I ever was on live TV, BronxNet TV. So it's fun to be on come back to my roots again, both in my own bedroom where my dad is right now and on the first channel that I was ever on live TV on. So
I
good.
think we had done an interview when I had a daytime TV show on BronxNet.
Oh, we did a bunch of them. Yeah.
We were in college, yeah. We
Yeah.
talked about the presidency. Anyway, be well. Love your beautiful wife, Haley. And folks, we'll be right back. We're going to talk about an open newsroom with some of the people from the city and why special education is important to them. We'll be right back.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet.
Welcome back to the Bronx Buzz, and we're going to change gears here. This is a really important segment, actually. Many different things happen to a lot of people as a result of the pandemic, and we always seem to find, whatever category it is, it's people who have less resources, who have less of a voice, who kind of get the short end of the stick. Enter the City and Chalkbeat, two publications. They are taking a look at special education students and parents and families, of course, and trying to figure out how they can do better through this very difficult time of life for all of us. So let me welcome one of the engagement fellows at the City. It is Lauren Costantino. Nice to have you with us, Lauren.
Thanks, Gary. Nice to be here.
And a reporter for Chalkbeat is Alex Zimmerman. Alex, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having us.
Good. Thank you for joining us. Ms. Costantino, let's just talk about the City, and why does this sort of project fit into the scope of what the City does and what you really want to do, aside from reporting the news so well that you always do?
So, projects like this are important to the City because we're always sort of looking for ways to create journalism that is collaborative among the communities that we cover. So, we're interested in hearing from the neighborhoods that we cover, sort of what issues are most top of mind for them. And, we try to make our reporting as responsive and as relevant as possible to these communities. So having events like this really allow us to sort of create more avenues of collaboration with these folks. Instead of just a one-to-one connection with the source, we're holding events and inviting people from all boroughs to come and speak on issues that are top of mind for them. And this special education newsroom is doing exactly that.
Let's be very open and honest. We're recording this on Monday. One of the sessions will be Wednesday of this week, but then there is another one that will be, I guess it's on Friday.
It's actually on Saturday, January 30th at 2 p.m. Yeah. So, we just want to allow as many people as possible to come. If, we know schedules are hectic, so that's where we're providing 2 opportunities
for everybody to participate. What do you hope to accomplish in this program?
Great question. So we're hoping from this conversation where, we're inviting panelists of a panel of experts to come and sort of speak on some of the issues that parents and teachers have told us are, have been really challenging for them. And so we're inviting, experts to come speak on those things and sort of have a more nuanced conversation. But we also want to have this event to foster connections within this community. People show up to these events, they're able to talk with one another in the breakout rooms, they're able to meet people that they wouldn't normally have met before, and get advice from parents who are navigating similar challenges, and to also come together and sort of brainstorm some solutions and ways that people have already been mitigating these issues amongst themselves.
Perfect segue to Mr. Zimmerman, who works for Chalkbeat, and they deal with education issues. Talk to me about conditions for children in special ed through this process. It's very obvious to me that they, in many ways, have been forgotten because they need additional support. And the last thing we all have in this circumstance is additional support. So talk to me about, in the spectrum of education, where special ed students are falling right now.
Yeah, I mean, providing special education services in the middle of a pandemic is really challenging. One of the biggest reasons it's really challenging is obviously lots of students with disabilities really thrive with lots of hands-on support. A lot of them receive one-on-one services or are in classrooms with multiple teachers. And one of the things that's been most challenging in the pandemic from an education perspective is that schools have to now staff two versions of school at the same time. They're trying to teach students who are coming into buildings, and at least for right now in elementary schools and for certain students with disabilities, and they're also trying to serve students who are fully remote. And so the schools are incredibly stretched thin in terms of staff, which makes providing really staff-intensive special education services difficult.
What you say sounds completely logical to me, completely unfortunate to me. Is one of the simple answers, as if there are simple answers, is one of the simple answers more funding, more support, more personnel, etc., which of course nobody has extra resources right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an ongoing conversation. We saw the governor put out his budget proposal for state education, and I think because of the funding issues that have been created by the coronavirus, it's a really challenging moment for state and city governments to suddenly infuse public schools with dramatically more money. So I'm not sure that that's going to be a super likely scenario right now. I know there are lots of advocates who are approaching this problem by really calling on the city to provide more compensatory services once kids can come back into buildings more, to sort of provide extra services so that students can catch up, presuming that they will have fallen behind where they would have been otherwise. But you're right. I mean, there aren't one of the reasons we're interested in doing this open newsroom event is to really hear from people who are on the front lines, whether they're parents or educators, to really understand like what would be most helpful for them right now, because so much of the conversation around special education right now is all of the things that aren't working, which are numerous.
Yeah, that's not funny. Let's put it that way. Ms. Costantino, let's just talk about, now I realize you haven't done the sessions yet. What do you anticipate people saying that you think, number one, collaboratively, it'll be good for them to hear. And then, of course, for experts and people in positions of responsibility, they can respond to.
I've heard from some experts on our panel. We'll have some people there, top names, advocates for children, Include NYC. We're having some parent formed organizations there, and they're really excited to hear from parents and teachers, and like Alex was saying, as to sort of, what would help them, and sort of, are there things that they've already been doing in their own classrooms or on their own remote platforms during school that has been helpful for those students? And if so, how can we cover that and sort of highlight these solutions so that, everybody else asking these same questions can sort of get some answers? I think, to Alex's point before, news organizations are really good about covering issues and problems, and we do that all the time. And, we're sort of hoping that we can produce some more stories out of this that are a bit more solutions focused, that, it doesn't necessarily have to be a happy story or a positive story, but something that might affect some change. And we know that that can start by looking inward at the community and asking them what they've already been doing that's been working. So we're hoping for that as well.
Mr. Zimmerman will give you the final word. I mean, I know that I saw a Zoom class of children who were in the regular track, and the music teacher was trying to teach percussion, and these were young children, maybe first or second grade, and they were just sitting there blankly at the screen. The challenges for a special ed child who needs care and love and one-to-one in this day and age must be very difficult. I guess you're hoping here to open a dialogue that will reach into people who have some resources.
Yeah, and I think you can, in just talking to lots of parents and educators, things can be really small bore and still be really helpful. So, for example, we often hear from parents that it's really helpful to create a sense of routine, and that one of the things that's really hard for students with disabilities right now is that they've lost their sort of normal school sense of routine, and that even just creating a structure out of what can seem like a sort of asynchronous day is really, really helpful. So
we're almost out of time. I really like the idea of what you said, that also advice for parents. I mean, it's one thing which I'm always dealing with, the big structures of things, but a little bit of advice for parents probably couldn't hurt. So we're going to put it up on the screen. The meeting that is coming up is January 30th, Saturday, January 30th, from 2 to 4 p.m. Parents of special ed children, teachers, anybody, the entire community. Frankly, it's on Zoom. The whole world can participate. And we do thank Alex Zimmerman from ChalkBeat and Lauren Costantino from the city. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you really for taking extra care of our special kids in the Bronx and in New York City. We really appreciate both of you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Okay, we will say goodnight, and we will see you next week. This week on Bronx Talk, we will be joined by Congressmember Adriano Espaillat. Tell us what it was like to be locked down in the Capitol building, and also all the myriad of issues that are coming out of Washington State. And we'll see you next week.